Once upon a time, there was a lie. A single lie that changed everything. Season 2 of The Last of Us begins not with action, but with silence, guilt, and a song. But if you've played The Last of Us Part 2, you immediately noticed things are different. The pacing, the faces, even the infected. In this video, we'll explore the 6 major differences between the episode Future Days and the start of the PlayStation game. Some of these changes reshape the story's emotional core, and they may just hint at what's coming next. Season 2 of The Last of Us opens with reflection, not repetition. Based on the sequel game, the episode immediately diverges, focusing on Joel's lie to Ellie instead of a time jump. Characters are introduced sooner, new threats emerge, and the narrative takes a more introspective path. These changes reshape how the story begins and what it wants us to feel. The video game begins with Joel's cold, haunting confession to his brother Tommy, 4 years after the events of the first game. It's quick, it's direct. It sets a tone of secrecy and unease. But the series chooses a different route. Future Days opens moments after the end of Season 1 with Joel and Ellie walking in silence. Ellie asks about the fireflies. Joel lies, his voice is steady, but his eyes say more than his words. This isn't a time jump, it's a continuation. The show brings us back to the emotional wound rather than leaping past it. Reportedly filmed during Season 1's production, this scene bridges the 2 seasons and sets a more reflective tone. It doesn't begin with truth, it begins with the cost of hiding it. The focus isn't Joel's guilt, it's Ellie's uncertainty. She looks at him not as a hero, but as someone she might not know anymore. In doing this, the series shifts perspective. Instead of asking, "What did Joel do?" it asks, "What did Ellie feel?" This isn't a minor change, it repositions the emotional gravity from action to aftermath. In the game, Abby enters the story like a thunderclap, sudden, shocking, and without context. Her presence is disruptive by design. Players don't know who she is. That mystery fuels the game's early tension. But in the series, Abby is introduced before the title sequence even plays. We see her moving through snow-covered terrain, on edge and heavily armed. She's quiet, calculating, and already on a mission. She doesn't need to say much. Her purpose is clear in her eyes. This isn't just a narrative shift. It's a signal. The show isn't aiming to shock you with Abby's arrival. It wants you to understand her, to see her as a person before she becomes a force of conflict. It's empathy by design. This choice also removes the sense of mystery, but in return, it adds depth. The audience isn't in the dark. They're complicit. They know something is coming. The tension is not about who Abby is, but when she'll act. By reordering her introduction, the series asks a more difficult question. Can you forgive someone, even when you've seen their motives from the start? The Last of Us Part 2 opens 4 years after the first game. The show, however, takes place 5 years later, and that extra year isn't the only difference. The premiere episode of Season 2 unfolds mostly the day before the game begins. In the game, players wake up as Ellie after Jackson's Winter Festival. The action kicks off immediately. In the series, we see everything that leads up to that moment. We watch Ellie dance with Dina. We see her discomfort around Joel. We feel the distance, before the chaos. This extra context isn't filler, it's tension building. It gives characters space to breathe, to reflect, to feel. The showrunners are using the timeline to stretch out emotion. It's not about hurrying to the big moments, it's about understanding what they mean before they happen. By slowing down the clock, the series creates a more grounded, emotional atmosphere just before it all unravels. The Stalker is a terrifying variant of the infected, fast, quiet, and dangerously intelligent. In the game, stalkers are already present by Part 1. Players know their patterns and behaviors. They're not new. But in the series, this is the first time we see one. The moment is executed like a horror scene. Flickering lights, tight corridors, heavy breathing. The stalker doesn't scream. It waits, it hunts. The tension comes from anticipation, not violence. By debuting this type of infected now, the show changes how viewers perceive threat. It's no longer about brute force. It's about stealth, evolution, fear of the unknown. The horror isn't just louder, it's smarter. This small change expands the world building. It tells us the infection isn't static, it's evolving. And that's a terrifying thought. Joel doesn't talk much in the games. He hides pain behind gruffness, vulnerability behind action. But in the show, we see a rare moment. Joel in a therapy session with Gail, Jackson's counselor. It's a quiet, emotional conversation. Joel admits to having nightmares, he speaks about Ellie, he confesses his fear of losing her, of not protecting her. This scene doesn't exist in the game. but it deepens Joel's character in a way the game never could. We see a man struggling to hold it together, a man shaped by guilt. It's a powerful humanization of a character who often feels mythic. The show isn't just telling the story of a survivor, it's telling the story of a man haunted by survival itself. The final scene of the episode leaves us with a chilling revelation. Spores, underground tunnels, infected moving silently beneath Jackson. In the game, the early combat happens outside the city, on the outskirts of civilization. But in the show, the threat is inside. A glimpse of tendrils crawling through plumbing lines suggests something horrifying. Jackson isn't safe. This isn't just a change in geography, it's a thematic shift. The game tells you danger is out there. The show tells you it's already here, and it raises the stakes. If infected can breach Jackson's defenses, what hope is left? This visual tease at the end transforms the final moments into a slow burn dread. No loud music, no violence, just creeping horror. It tells us one thing loud and clear. The world of The Last of Us is never still, never safe. With future days, HBO proves it isn't afraid to rewrite expectations. This isn't a direct adaptation, it's an emotional reconstruction. Each change, from Abby's early arrival to Joel's therapy, adds layers. The story is still The Last of Us, but now it's filtered through a different lens. One that prioritizes introspection over action, silence over spectacle. These aren't just 6 differences, they're 6 statements. Statements about what this show wants to be, about what kind of emotional journey it's crafting. Whether you're a veteran of the games or watching for the first time, this premiere sets a clear tone. The path ahead won't follow a straight line. It will hurt, it will surprise, and it will challenge how we think about love, loss, and survival. So, what did you think of the changes? Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and stay tuned, because we'll be tracking every twist and turn of this remarkable story. And remember, sometimes the quietest moments carry the loudest truths.